So most people, when they want to grow their business, they say, I should work harder. I should do more. And of course, the more you do, the harder you work. The irony is the more you're becoming trapped in that business. So how do you build something that's independent of you? The key expression is it's not about more. It's about better. Fewer, better choices makes all the difference in the world. As an entrepreneur, we get sucked into trying to do too much. Some people think, oh, David, I feel like we're going to starve for lack of opportunity. But you want to know what the real danger is? The real danger a lack of opportunity, or is it drowning in too much opportunity? By far, it's the drowning in too much opportunity. So as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we have to make good choices of where the better and higher use of our time is. And that's what I want to talk about here right now in this session. How can you upgrade your use of time? Inside of your business, you are the single greatest leverage point initially. Later on, as you progress your business over further toward level 3, your team and your systems become a greater leverage point than just you. But initially, you're the biggest leverage point. So don't work harder, work smarter. The single greatest myth as it relates to time is we say this. We say, I don't have enough time. That's pure and complete what? Crap! We're going to keep it Disney in here. Crap! We don't have enough time. Well, hang on a second. We have all the time there is. All of us have all the time that there is. As long as we're alive and breathing, we have all the time that there is. And this became really hit home for me when I was watching somebody come over to take care and water our new plants. We built a house in Virginia, and we had all these beautiful trees put in. And when you put in new trees there, you have to make sure they get for at least a couple months, they get established with the roots, that you have to really good deep watering. Never would have occurred to me. Now, I didn't want to go around this plant for 60 seconds, this plant for 60. I wasn't going to spend an hour out there every day watering the plant. So I hired somebody. So we hired this woman who came over to water our shrubbery, and she's got the hose going. And she's talking on a cell phone, and I'm watching her. Here's the tree. She's watering the tree there, and she's talking on the cell phone, and she's coming back over here and looking around and talking on the phone. And, of course, life is like that. The hose is always running. Time is always flowing. You can't control how much water comes out, how much time you have in a day. You can only better direct what you choose to water with the time that you have. You can't get more water. You can simply choose to do better things with the water. How many of you have ever watched a sprinkler system in someone's house that most of the sprinkler was actually going into the street, right? Isn't that crazy? They can't control. The sprinklers are always on. Are you going to water what matters most, or are you going to water things that don't make a difference? So here's we're going to go through 7 different strategies to do this. The first is remembering it's not about more, it's about better. So first strategy is as follows. Number 1, to upgrade your use of time, you've got to identify what do you do that actually creates value in your business. You need to be very clear. I mean, literally writing down what do you do that creates value. Now, the best way that I can share with you is we've created something called the time value matrix. I'm going to walk you through it here. Some of you have heard me teach this before. Great. This will be a wonderful recap. We need refreshers on this one here. It's important. It's important. So most people, in terms of distinctions around time, have the following distinction around time. They call it work days and weekends, right? Some people say, David, I have billable hours and non-billable hours. But generally, most people don't have any more distinctions around time. I want to share with you 4 categories of time, with each category being more and more important. How many of you have ever heard of the 80-20 rule? Now, I've heard it ascribed to an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto, and other people. I don't know who it was that created it. But the rule goes like this. He says that, David, 80% of what you do only generates 20% of your results. We'd all agree that if you do 4 times of energy to create 1/4 of the result here, that's a pretty low leverage activity. But he said the opposite was true. 20% of what you do creates 80% of your results. And most business owners have heard this principle before. How many have heard that before? Let's talk about how to apply that in a really rigorous way. So we're going to say that, hey, 80% of what you do gives you 20% of your return. We call that time D time. It's the 80% mass that gives you very, very little. for your return. We give that a relative value of 1. For every 1 hour of D time, you get 1 hour of result. The reason is because we want to be able to compare D time with C, B, and A time. I know the names weren't so inspirational, but the concepts really are powerful. So if you say that 20% of 80% of what you do gives you 20% of the result, 20% of what you do gives you 80% of your result. And let's look at that here. So first of all, what are some examples of this 80% mass? I want each of you to identify those things that you do that create very little return. Here's some examples for me in my business life. I'm sorting through mail. How many of you ever have to deal with sorting through mail, right? I mean, is that a good use of your time? Right? They need to be opened. They need to be processed. Some needs to be scanned. Some needs to be paid. Some needs to be thrown away immediately or into the recycle bin. Another one for me, paying and disputing bills. I'm a self-righteous son of a gun. Any other of you that's self-righteous out there? So you ever, like I've had charged on my credit card. It's like a $17 charge that I don't think is accurate. How many of you have spent hundreds of dollars of your time to solve a $17 billing dispute? Why? Because I would rather die than go to my grave thinking I erroneously paid this, right? Makes no sense. But these are examples of D activities. Very low return for that. Another example would be low-level email, right? How many of you would be honest enough to say that at least half your email would fall into this category? The low-level stuff that you've got. One more example here, creating presentation books. Now, for me, that's specific to what I do. So the presentations that I give, it used to be the case that every time I came back from a presentation, I would want to put that together into a 3-ring binder. Nowadays, I don't do a 3-ring binder. What do? I scan it. Why? Because I'm notorious that when I have these pages here and I want to give a new presentation, I pirate the old ones and mix and match. But if I'm not careful, the one that was really good before, when I want to go back to it, all the pages are other places, or the order's off. So nowadays, when I come back from a workshop that I'm teaching fresh or new, or I've changed things, what will happen is I put in my scan box for my assistant to go ahead and scan through. All that stuff stays there. But for me, a low-level activity is to actually put together that presentation book to save it for future. It's not worth it for me to sit there and go into the scan machine. Just isn't worth doing. Even though I have a fast one in the office, that's not a good use of time. That's a D-level activity. What are examples of 3 of your D-level activities? If you would, write down what are 3 of the things that you do in your business life that create so little value, but you find yourself doing them. 3 D activities for you. Could be around email that you do. Could be about customer service for people who've never bought from you. Any of you got stuck doing customer service from someone who's never spent a dime, nor ever will with you? Could be dealing with a vendor that you're no longer using, where they're trying to get you back and win back your business, but you have no intention of ever working with them, but you're just too polite to get them out of your office, right? A lot of things it could be. What are 3 tangible D-level activities that you've got? Write them down, please. I'm going to ask you to share with us here in just a moment. Everyone writing down 3 specific D-level activities. If you got time, put a 4th one in there. How many of you have at least 3 activities of D-level activities you've identified? Keep working on it. We still got half of you that need to do it. Okay, bring you back front. Who'd be willing to share one of your D-level activities? Raise your hand. I'll call on you to shout it out. So over here, yes. Yes. Yep. Wasting calls to candidates that you'll never place in your business. Wonderful. How about over here? Caleb says keeping track of expense receipts. D-level activity for him. Who else over here has one? Here, raise your hand. Yep. For you, Mark? Making the courtesy reminder calls that someone's going to be showing up to do the work for his customers. What's another example this side? Yes, over here, Val. Yeah, those escapist activities that happen during your business life, like going and checking the news. I love it. What's another example of a D-level activity? Yes, Helen. Looking for all those lost things in your business, lost files, lost checks, lost wallets, billfolds. Yes, over here. Yeah, taking through and going and editing and rewriting the response to something when the first draft was fine, especially if it's not that important, because we want it to be just right. I love it here. Alejandra. Prepping for your taxes. I love that for you as a D-level activity. Good. Here's the thing. Yes, one more in the back here, Lily. Facebook. Oh, and we'll add any of the other social media ones that you get getting lost in there. For a lot of you, that could be a D-level activity. Here's the thing. Your D-level activities might be different than somebody else's. They're all relative just to you. So we all have D-level activities. The next layer up says, we call this C time. We say that, look, if 20% of what we do gives us 80% of the result, we call that C time. By relative value, C time is 16 times more valuable. How do we know that? It's 1/4 the input generates 4 times the output. 4 times 4 is what? 16. It's the most math I'm going to ask you. I'll give you the other math along the way. These would be an example of this 20% of what we call a leveraged activity. Here's some examples for me that I'm going to have you choose for you. So first, for examples for me would be delegating to Teresa. I might sit down for a 15-minute conversation with her and give her 8 to-dos. 15 minutes of time for me, she can generate perhaps 5 to 10 hours worth of work output off of that conversation. So delegating to someone else often can be a C-level activity. Next, I put down dictating a letter. I do a lot of writing, and I get tired of typing. So I'll dictate letters. Matter of fact, I'll upgrade that now. A lot of times nowadays, I won't even send the letter. What I'll do is I'll send by email the audio file. I do that for a lot of clients. They really enjoy that. Vendors as well. For example, I was dealing with an attorney, and rather than sit there and type up my instructions to him, I actually just dictated it and sent him a 4-minute audio file. So for me, I like doing that. So it's a leveraged way. I can do that while walking to and from my office. I can physically be moving around, and I'm more of an auditory person. I do it faster. Another example for me is meeting with multiple people at once versus one-to-one on a common project. If I can meet with, for example, if we're working on a correction for a website that we've got, if I can meet with the programmer and someone else from my office who's going to oversee the project, and all at once, as opposed to individually, I can really leverage the time better. So what are, for you, 3 of your C-level activities? They're leveraged, but they're not highly leveraged. They're not the magic 1% of what you do. The things that you do that you get a magnified return. What are some of your C-level activities? Write down, if you would, 3 or more C-level activities in your business life. Got a couple of you want to raise your hand. I call on you, and you can shout out what it is for you. What's one of your C activities? Raise your hand, and I'll call on you. Yes, over here, Jeff. Great. So calling into the office and saying, look, we made a sale. Can you put the contracts together and send it off there? It's leveraged for you. You get them to do the paperwork, but it's not highly leveraged. Other examples. Raise your hand. Yes, in the back here. Working on a website, getting a website up better, fine-tuned or something like that. Great. Great. So periodic check-in with the client saying, hey, how are things going? Are we doing well for you? Val, over here. Putting your offers out there for you in the real estate world. Yes, Mac. Great. Putting together strategic alliance. Great. Now, you might find that later on, when I cover B and A time, some of these things might have actually a higher value than you currently give. Maybe not, depending where you are. When you look at C time versus D time, we all know that C time is more valuable by far. You're already getting 16 times more value. B time is the next step up. Look, and here do we come up with it? We said, look, if 20% of what you do gives you 80% of your return, then 20% of the 20% gives you 80% of the 80%. And if you just work the math out, what it means is 4% of what you do, we call this the sweet spot. gives you 64% of your result. And if you do a little bit of straight math, what you're saying is for every 1 hour of B time in relationship to D time, it's actually 64 times more valuable. Not 64%, but 64 times more valuable. A B-level activity. Let's talk about what this might look like. These are the things that you do that have a huge impact. For example, for me, I put down writing a sales letter that can be used over and over again as an evergreen offer. That would be an example. If I was only going to use it one time, it might not be a B-level activity in our business life. Another example I put down here, which was establishing a joint venture relationship with somebody. The actual day-to-day making that relationship work, I might hand that off to somebody else. It might be their very most important thing, but for me, the establishment of that relationship might be a B-level activity. I put down here recording a class that we can offer again and again and again. The creation of that. For me, that's a B-level activity. Record it once, and the business can use that with clients year after year after year until it needs to be edited and updated. Another example I put down here was giving a sales presentation to a larger group would be an example of a B-level activity for me in the business. Now, everyone's business is different. Remember, your A-level, your B-level, your C and D-level activities are different than other people. But what do you think would 3 of your B-level activities be? These are things that give you a real return for what you're doing. These are just some examples in my business life. Sparking out. You want to actually come up with concrete answers. In what you're doing here, I would strongly recommend that every quarter you sit down and revisit this list, and at least twice a year you rewrite the list from scratch. Why? Hopefully, what's a B-level activity for you today, you'll push down to a C or a D-level activity next year. To you right now, meeting with a client one-to-one might be a B-level activity because your business needs the sales. Maybe it's an A-level activity, like you need the sales like tomorrow. But I'm hoping that a year from now, a better use of your time might be to work with a sales team member that you're training to be building the ability to do that. So for you, maybe meeting with a client one-to-one might be a C-level activity a year from now. And working with your sales team to meet with sales clients might be a B-level activity. So it should change over time. You should be able to push down the value and step up higher and higher with what you do. So what were some examples of some of your B activities? Who'd be willing to shout out what you got? What are some of your B activities? Yeah, Jeff. Great. So standardizing some of his responses to inquiries about working with a client. Creating that system around it. I love it. What would be another example for it? Yes, all the way over here from Caesar. Training one of your team members. Absolutely. Especially if it's a key team member. Absolutely. What's another example of one of your B? Kelly. Meeting with your advisors, sitting down with them and helping to kind of put together a mini plan for what you're working on. Great. These are all examples of these individuals' B activities. Now the next layer says, okay, if 20% of what I do gives me 80% of the return, what does 20% of the 20% give me? Gives me 80% of the 80% of 80%. If you work out the math, it simply says 1% of what I do gives me half of the result that I get. Matter of fact, if you wanted to work the pure math, you're looking at 0.8% of what you do gives you 51%, but we rounded the numbers off. The concept's more important. We call this the magic 1%. And what we're saying here is it's the 1% of what you do. It's that one flash of inspiration that gives you huge value. Let me share a couple examples. So our last book, Build a Business, Not a Job. There are 3 specific places to this book that writing it was an A activity for me. What do you think those 3 places would be? Wasn't the outline. It wasn't even just the cover design. It was the choice of the title. How many of you would agree that when you go to a bookstore, either online or in person, that one of the first things that catches your eye about whether or not you should look at a book or not is the title? Second thing was the actual sales copy on the back cover, or if it's a hardcover for one of our hardcovers, the inside sleeves, that convince someone that wants to buy the book. But I'll go one further. For us, we know that most of the business book, how many of you hear that when you buy a business book, if the title catches your attention, you look at the back cover, and you'll also look at the table of contents to see if you want to buy it? We know that. So for us, the back cover, table of contents are important for us because there's like the sales piece for the book. A lot of authors choose their table of contents to be a not so much of a description as kind of these cutesy little titles. We don't do that. I mean, if you look at our table of contents, our formula is 3 to 3.5 pages long. It has things like the 4 building blocks for this, the 7 pitfalls of that. Really much more direct mail copy with that. There's one more place in here, though. What do we want this book to do? 2 things. We want the book to give a great introduction to what we do for business owners. But one more thing. If someone has the book and we don't know who they are, does that help us as a business? It doesn't, really. It doesn't. So there's one more place in here, which is the value add. If you look in all of our books, you'll notice that in the back there's an appendix that offers some really powerful value add that they get if only they do what with the book? Register it. And so for us, we might offer 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of little training modules that they'll get if only they register the book. Great stuff. Took us might take us $50,000, $60,000 of resources to put together. But once you have it up there, there's no incremental cost to fulfill to more people. It helps us find out who is the reader so we can build a relationship. To build a relationship, we have to know who they are. So for me, the title, the back cover / table of contents, and that value add, writing those, A time. Writing the rest of the book, the first real draft through, B time. And the reason why it's even that for us is probably because 40 to 50, maybe even more % of our business clients have chosen to work with us because of the value they got from one of our books. How many of you that one of your first introductions to the Maui community of business owners was through one of our books that you read? Yeah, and we find it's a pretty important thing to make sure you're getting a great value from that. So for us, now how about editing for grammar and usage? Is that B time? No, that's C or D time. I can hire an editor. Matter of fact, I do. Her name's Barbara McNichol. She's edited 4 of our books in the last 7 years. She's great. I don't want to be editing for that. Now, from our perspective, that's how I would break it down as an analogy here. So here's some examples of my A time, and look for it for yourself. You're going to be trying to discern what are 3 or 4 of your A activities. So for me, initiating a very important joint venture relationship, that first starting point to the relationship. Once we've nailed down the main business points, we can let our individual teams connect to follow up from there. Setting out the business strategy. Which markets are we going to go into? Which markets are we going to let go of for now? How are we going to go into these markets? What products or services are we going to offer? To my mind, that strategic level direction from the big picture of a business, for me, that's an A-level time. That's what's one of the most important things that I do. I mentioned already about the title, back cover, and the appendix for the book. So let's just ask you, what are 3 of your A-level activities? 3 of the things that create the most value per unit of time that you do in your business. Take a moment to write that down. 3 of your A-level activities. All right. Get a couple of you who want to share what some of your A-level activities are. Raise your hand. I'll call on you. I want you to shout it out. Yes, over here. Great. One-on-one time with a potential investor, a capital source for you. Yes. Negotiating an offer for you. What's another example of A time for you? Yes, Mac. Yep. Great. Making the big picture strategic decisions based off of looking at his metrics. All the way in the back here. Sales growth. So focusing on self-growth. Okay, got it. For you, for the business owner, growing as the business owner. Thank you for sharing that here. Who else would be want to share one of your A-level activities over here? Yes. Analyzing a deal. Great, for you. Wonderful. Yep, in the back over here, Mohammed. Great, creating your business plan, strategizing for the business, big picture. Wonderful. Generally, you're going to find for A and B level activities, these are going to be things that don't have any real urgency to them, but they make a huge impact. And these are generally the things that, because they don't have an urgency to them, we tend to do what with them? Procrastinate them. Plus, these tend to be things that are more intimidating. Like, for example, a strategic partnership that getting that going requires that you pick up the phone and do what? Call them. It can be intimidating. What if they say no? What if they say you're too small? What if they say that we don't want to do business with you? Your product's not good enough for us. Who knows, right? You're facing that rejection. And the planning side, there's never a perfect time to do the planning because you're always saying, well, I'll get to it next week. But of course, next week is just like this week. These little crises come up. What's interesting is so little of our time goes there, but it makes such a big difference. So here's your goal. The good thing is I used to think you had to look at A, B, C, and D level time to improve it. Nowadays, I think you only have to look at two places. Look at your D level time and ask yourself, how can you get rid of 5 hours of D time or more per week and reinvest that in A and B uses? That's your goal. By the way, when you stop doing D time, an activity there, what's the consequence? Very little. If you have a D-level activity and the consequence is huge, what does that tell you? It's not a D-level activity. By definition, D-level activity, which you have the most of, says it has the least impact, which means if you get rid of it, there's very little impact. So we talked before about this idea of when you get rid of D time, you're going to use what we call those 4 Ds. I'll go back through them here again in a moment. But your goal is to look first at your D activities. So strategy 2 says, in order for you to find time, look first to your D-level activities. Because probably 3/4 of your day is comprised of these D-level activities. So the 4 Ds say, delete it, get rid of it. Something should never be done by anybody. If the impact of not doing it is just a minor inconvenience, don't even bother doing it. Just hit the delete button literally. If you kind of keep it in front of you all the time, it's going to distract you and take away mental energy. Just get rid of it. Next, D stands for delegate. Maybe it has to be done, but get somebody else to do it. Your assistant, your operations manager, your sales manager, your marketing person, your controller or CFO. The next D says defer it. Put it off. Maybe it does need to be done, but do you need to do it now? Is it the best choice for you to do now? Oftentimes in the business, we'll go ahead and delay things for, hey, we'll revisit this in 1 quarter, and we'll come back and revisit that. The final D says design it out. We've talked about that earlier today, but just to remind you, design it out says things like, we have these things happen over and over again. How do I keep them from coming up? For example, how many of you delete the same person's email over and over again twice a day? Right? Why not just get off the list? Well, I'm afraid if I hit the unsubscribe button on the list, they might send me more spam. Great. Set up your email filter about that, right? Do you have the same types of things that you ask your assistant to do over and over again? Great. Why not empower him to do it without you asking? Anytime you see an email that comes in like this, I want you to handle it from here forward. I've already trained you how to do it. I want you to handle it. And for the first 30 days to make sure I'm comfortable that you're doing it the right way, go ahead and just put a checkbox in my Outlook so I can see that it's been done. And I'll be comfortable with that, right? So hand it off in a more permanent way. Customer issues, customer support issues. Can you redo your way that you do your customer support so that you preempt this from coming up? We talked before about when you buy a new computer, they give you that little poster that says step 1, step 2, step 3 to set it up. Can you do that for your clients to make it easier for them? One of the doctors we work with, he's a surgeon. He gives the same preoperative instructions to every one of his patients over and over and over and over again. Now, he can bill at several $1,000s per hour when he's in the OR, even up to $10,000 to $15,000 per hour in the OR. Is sitting down to go one by one to give preoperative instructions for 10 or 15 minutes per patient, is that a good use of his time? It's not. What did he do? He put together a DVD that spent, and it was very clear, probably gave a 20 to 30 minute going through all the preoperative things of what they needed to do, because he does pretty consistent types of procedures. He plays that for him. His nurse plays that for him. And then he comes in at the end and says, do you have any questions? And the good thing is that the customer, the patient in his case, they actually feel like they got a what? A better result. They got more clear instructions. They had more time with him, even though they really didn't, but it felt that way. So he gets a better result for less of his time. That's how powerful it is to design something out. This would also include your FAQs on the websites. This would include a new startup kit for any new customer. For those of you who have a real estate business, might be a new resident kit that you give to them. For example, how many of you, when you hire somebody, you go through the same orientation about your company with every employee that you bring on? What about creating an orientation system that walks them through that, and then you can follow up with questions with that? You've designed that part out. Strategy number 3 says this. You need to get more A and B level time, you're going to have to restructure your week. You can save time by getting rid of D level activities, but what's the danger? You save this time, and what's the danger? You fill it up with more junk. It's kind of like you do a garage sale, you get rid of all your junk, and then what do? You go to other people's garage sales and buy more junk. I laugh, I'm smiling. I do that myself. I love having a garage sale because I get rid of all the stuff, free up all the space. But I also, when I see a garage sale, guess what I do? I love looking through the books that they have available there just to see what's there. Crazy, isn't it? Adding up more stuff, more junk. So how do you structure your week? Let's talk about this here. First of all, I want to give you a distinction around time. We call it focus days versus push days. Now, a focus day, and I'm going to suggest that you find 1 day per week. If your business is advanced stage level 2 and you can afford it, 2 days a week that you call focus days. And on those days, you're not going to do the low value activities. You're going to focus as best you can on A and B level projects that you're going to get meaningful blocks of time done for. If you can't do the full day as a focus day, at least you can get done half a day. Every one of you can get down a 4 to 5 hour block for your focus day. If you can't get a full day, you can certainly do that. If you're going to take half a day, which half of the day do I suggest strongly? The first half of the day. Because if you do the second half of the day, you'll be tired, you'll get caught up in what you're doing, and you probably won't take it. By the way, if you force yourself to have this focus time, and you have a business that's totally dependent on you, what are you doing to the business? You're weaning it on getting used to not having you there all the time. And if you say, David, I can't do 4 hours because the world will come to an end, do 3. 2. 90 minutes, right? All businesses should be able to have you out for that time. For me, Tuesdays and Thursdays are my focus days. Focus days does not mean that you go lock yourself in your office and don't talk to anyone on the phone, don't do any email, don't communicate with anybody else. It simply says that what you're going to do is you're going to schedule in those A and B level activities. How many of you that one of your A and B level activities involves communicating with other people? Great. You should do that on your focus day, whether that's face-to-face, on the phone, or emailing. Now be careful though, if it is emailing, be careful to hit the send receive button. And for those of you who have your email automatically checked for email, change that right away. Make it where your email doesn't automatically do what's called push. Make sure that you have to manually hit the send and receive button if you can. Why? Because if you don't do that, you will be so tempted to constantly come back and do what? Check. Now in your focus days, a couple other suggestions for you. I suggest you get out of your office if you can. Because in your office, you have email, you have project lists, you have all this other stuff that calls for your attention. It's kind of like seducing you to get rid of your focus day. Plus, interruptions from staff. So my suggestion is get out of the office. If you have a physical office, work from home for a morning. For me, I have a physical office, but I have 2 twins, 2.5-year-olds, so I don't work from home for peace of mind anymore. I'll go to a local coffee shop or to a library. I'll get out of that environment to go do my focus time. If you've got a conference room, jump to the conference room. You want to get out of the environment to make it easy for you to do that. If your focus day revolves around you meeting with other people, have all those sessions lined up in advance if you can. So you can go for the majority of the day to important meeting, if that's one of your A or B level activities. Now, a push day is a little bit different. A push day, what that specifically refers to, is every other day it's not a focus day. It means those days that you're pushing your business one step ahead. It's the doing the job of your business, right? It's the getting involved in the doing of the business. For some of you, that means fulfilling on client orders. For others of you, it means dealing with staff challenges. With some of you, it means making sure that the financial part of your business gets accounted for, creating your invoices. For some of you, it means the sales picture that you have to do. But generally speaking, you're looking for just one day a week that's your focus day, maybe two. I'm not asking for every day to be a focus day. Why? Because it's not realistic. If all you did were focus days, the problem is the business would fail because you're not taking care of those more mundane things that do need to be there. But if you only take care of those mundane things that need to be there and don't have any real focused time, what's the danger? The business won't grow. And a business that eventually stays static will eventually die, or the owner will, or at least feel like he is, right? Or wish he is, right? So focus day, everyone right now, I want you to choose what's your focus day going to be. It's either a full day, 2 days, or a half day. Suggest that you don't make it the first day of the week. I suggest that you don't make it the last day of the week. First day of the week, things that came up during your time off, like your weekend, they're going to be there. You want to deal with it. The last day before you leave for the weekend is probably not the best day to do a focus day, although you can. I have some clients that like Friday as their focus day. But I caution you from it. Generally speaking, it's not the best strategy. So what for you is going to be your focus day? How many of you are Tuesday focus day? Okay. How many of you are Wednesday? How many of you are Thursday? How many of you are Monday or Friday? And how many of you here still have not made the choice? We can stare at you until you make that choice. Great. So everyone stare right here at James and John. We want you guys to be making your choice, because if you don't make the choice here, you won't make the choice out there. And you'll be living forever on the fence, and it'll just cost you too much. So make the choice. You can always do what? Change your mind, but make the choice right now. So I see James writing. John, I didn't see you keep writing. Tuesday, did you write it down? Great. So we'll wait for you while you write it down right now. I can't tell what he's writing, but I know he's writing something. James, did you write Tuesday on there? Yes. Victory! Good. So let's talk a little bit more about this idea. So on your push days, that brings us to our next strategy. Every push day, I want you to do something called working above the line. And here's what it looks like. Every push day, I want you to decide, look, what's a 60-minute to 90-minute block of time that you can create and carve out? We call this block of time your prime time. So look, once a week, you're going to take 1 day a week. By the way, that's how much of your time? 20%. Now, knowing that you won't only do on your focus day, because I know you're human just like the rest of us, right? But even if you get half that day focused just on those A and B level activities, how many of you recognize that if you did this every single week, you'd have amazing progress in your business? Absolutely. Absolutely. So on your push days, I want you to choose a block of time to call it your prime time. How many of you, your best time is the morning first thing? How many of you, you're freshest at the end of the day because you're a night owl? Great. Or somewhere in between. I don't care when it is. So for me, I know that from about 9 o'clock when I get into the office to about 10:30, that for me is my sharpest time of the day. I know that. So if you look at my calendar, I block consistently this time off to do my A and B level activities for that day. And what I do is, every single work day, that's a push day, what I do is I work above the line. What that means is I come up with 3 bottom lines for the day. 2 business, 1 personal. How many of you have a to-do list for each day that you actually find that you need more than 1 planner page to do it? It's crazy. It's intimidating, isn't it? All I'm going to simply ask for you to do is to say, okay, on the top of my to-do list, I'm going to write 1, 2, and 3, and then put a big line, or you can even box it around it if you want to. I want to visually mark off what the most important bottom lines for the day are. By the way, if I only got my bottom lines done today, the day was a what? It's a victory, a success, by far. 2 business items and 1 personal. Now, you can get rid of the personal one if you don't need that. I need the reminder so I don't lose balance. If I'm not careful, I can become a little bit more toward the workaholic side. That's my tendency. I get kind of lost with the work. So typically on the personal side, what I'll write down are things like exercise, cuddle with my wife. I know it's sad that I have to actually write that down. But if I write that down, if I actually have down there cuddle with my wife, and it's like 9 o'clock at night, and we've just been running around with the kids, and we haven't done any cuddling, I will, to make sure I can check, because I put these down as a little negative sign. At the end of the day, I got to go make it a little positive. I'll go at 9 o'clock at night and say, honey, let's just sit on the couch for just a couple minutes here and cuddle. And she'll, now, my belief is she probably knows that that's because of the list. But you know what? She's happy because we get a cuddle. So I don't know what it is for you. For me, I'll put down things like journal. That's an important one for me. Exercise. And usually that or Heather, something around my wife. I don't need reminders around the kids because it's so easy right now to do that when they're 2.5 years old. All you want to do is just cuddle them for forever. But I need the reminders with that. So what for you are your 2 business bottom lines for the day and your 1 personal? You're not trying to get 20 things accomplished. You're saying, out of all the things I can do today, come heck or come high water, these are the most important for the day. Every day, 5 days a week. In addition to that, we have what we call the results rule. Let me just kind of walk you through that here. And what it says is, by 10:30 a.m., I want to have done all 3 of these items or have scheduled a definite appointment during which I'm going to actually get those items done with enough time that I realistically can. Now, you all have picked a block of time every weekday for just 1 hour to 90 minutes. In today's world, you don't get lots of value when you spend 5 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 15 minutes here. I know it feels like you make lots of progress because you're checking things off, but A and B level activities, rarely do you get those done in a 5-minute block of time. How many of you have recognized that? You don't need 4 days to get an A level activity done, but you typically need 30 minutes, an hour and a half to get a meaningful block of that done. So what we're doing is we're designing how we structure our week so that at least 1 day a week and 1 block every other day of the week, we get some meaningful block of what we need to get done. During your prime time block, guess what you put in there? Your bottom lines for the day. And your bottom lines for the day almost always are going to be what level activities? A or B. A or B. And at the end of the week, even if you only hit the 80% level, you've got 8 of these bottom lines for your business done that week. How many of you recognize that would be a lot more than you're probably currently getting? It has a huge cumulative effect if you do it that way. Again, we call that working above the line. Before you start doing all this other to-do stuff, you make sure that you've done this stuff first, or you've scheduled a definite time at which you'll do it, if it's more of an appointment-based thing. Which brings us to the next strategy, strategy number 5. It says, create that prime time block every single day. That's a push day. That's 60 to 90-minute period. And my suggestion is you actually put it into your schedule as a reoccurring appointment. How many of you use some kind of computer to do your daily schedule? Great. Those of you who are paper-based, just write it in every day. Literally write it in. But if it's computer-based, set it up as a reoccurring thing. Because if you don't block out the time, something else is going to fill in there. It will, without question. So you say, well, how do these ideas work? This is Gurpreet Pata, one of the doctors we work with. And last night I actually shared with you a story about how he had started his medical billing company. Well, in 2006, he got our time mastery course. I just want to share this with you because I want you to get how useful these ideas can be for you. Great. So I'll share the final part. He proceeded to drive his office staff crazy for about a month because it was his practice. So when there weren't patients in the office, he'd be playing it out loud. And it just drove him crazy, the same things over and over again. Here's what he said the end result was. I actually have had a lot of conversations with him and the woman who manages a lot of his businesses, Amy. It says, the results speak for themselves. The program helped me to radically upgrade my use of time and make an additional $1 million of net income. And this is something that he still uses to this day. We get referrals from him all the time around that. Finishing off the letter here, I still use the same strategies and principles to this day and find them just as useful and profitable. So just what I've shared with you right there is the base foundation of how you upgrade your use of time. Now, we said earlier that discipline is not about willpower. It's about what? Environment and accountability. Do you see that how we've structured this with focus days, prime time slots, working above the line? Do you see how we've focused on the structure part of that discipline? You're still going to need a little bit of the accountability side. You're still going to need to make sure someone's checking in with that, because if you don't, you won't do what you know to do. Half the battle is knowing what to do. I've given you what to do. The other half of the battle is to do what you know. All right. Next strategy, number 6. Says, create the structure that helps you succeed. Actually, you know what? I've already talked about this part. I'm going to jump ahead. So the 4 structural advantages of a level 3 business. Let's jump here. The first is making sure that you take your focus day or days. If you leave here today with nothing else but take the focus day concept, it's going to further your business in a very large way. Now, you can't make every day a focus day because it's focusing too much on the future. It's kind of like, have you guys ever gone hiking on a wooded path, right? You have to watch where you're walking because rocks or branches on the ground. And if you don't watch where you're going, if you're always looking at where you want to go to, what happens? You trip. But if all you do is look down at the ground, how many of you have ever walked into a branch that knocks you on the head? So you've got to look down for most of it, but make sure you look up, looking down, going forward. That's why 1 day a week is a useful time. If you have an advanced stage level 2 business or a level 3 business, 2 days a week makes more sense. You don't want more than that. Next, make sure you take the prime time. Every day. Write down in your notes right now when for you on your non-focus day is going to be your prime time. I've told you for me it's 9 to 10:30 in the morning, roughly. What for you is it going to be? At least an hour. All you really need is an hour to 90 minutes for that day. Next, what's the accountability structure you're going to have? Who's going to help hold you accountable for that? Maybe you can partner up with some mastermind people that'll help you do that. Can't be your business partner or spouse. We've already talked about that. That won't work. Tough to have that be your employees. Causes more issues. Number 4 says leverage the experience of your mentors. Leverage the experience of other people. This goes back to what I'll call the 7th strategy here. Jump ahead here. Okay. Well, I don't have the slide for it. Let me just tell you what I think it is, which is getting rid of your junk food. How many of you, we call it the time addictions. How many of you, if you were being honest, and don't raise your hand just because I don't want to embarrass anybody. Check off on your sheet of paper if what I'm about to say applies to you. If you spend more than 5 hours per week watching television for junk television, check off a little check there on your page. If you spend more than 10 hours per week, check off a second one. If you spend more than 5 hours of low-level email a week, check off one. If you spend more than 10 hours, put a second one on there. If you spend more than 5 hours doing what I'll call waste or junk web surfing, just check out the latest YouTube video to see about the dancing cats, check off for that one there. 5 hours. If you spend more than 10, put 2 check marks there. So we're up to 30 hours total per week. If you spend more than 5 hours a week in low-level office duties that you could easily pay somebody else less than $20 an hour to take over, put another one on there for every 5 hours you think you do that. And in your personal life, if you spend more than 5 hours per week doing low-level things around your house or errand types of things that you could pay somebody else $20 an hour or less for, $25 an hour or less for every 5 hours you do, check that off, with one exception. If you're doing it because you want to role model to your children the importance of doing those things, then those are no longer D-level activities. One of our clients has 11 children, pregnant with their 12th. Now, for them, they've got a very successful business. They could hire someone to do all that work. But then what would their kids do to learn how to be self-reliant, self-sufficient? So their kids, they want to do the work with their kids. Fair enough. Fair enough. And as our kids get older, I want them to see Dad clean toilets. I want them to see that. Not because I like cleaning toilets, but because I want them to be involved with, part of what we do as a family is we clean up here or clean up there. Certainly. And if I knew how to change the oil in my car and I could do that with my sons when they're older, I would probably do it because that would be more meaningful from that perspective. But from a do I really want to be doing these activities perspective, and wouldn't it be better to hire someone perspective, that's what you're looking here. How many of you have at least 10 hours a week of what we call junk activity? At least. Yeah. How many of you have more than 20 hours per week? Yeah, a number of you. And I know it's hard to kind of look at it, but the average American probably has closer to 30 plus hours per week of junk activities. Who would agree if that's true? Think about that. If you just took 5 hours per week of that time and reinvested in your business, how many think you could get a lot more from that? Or how about if you take 5 hours a week and reinvest it in your own personal enjoyment of your life from those other activities? Forget, sometimes it's not even about doing more in the business. It's about doing more of those other activities that feed and refresh you. So the last thing I'll leave you with on the time mastery subject is simply this. Get rid of some of the junk hours that you have and fill it with better food. Rather than eating the candy that just really doesn't leave you anything more than an empty, crashing sugar high, instead fill it with things like that, the fruits or the vegetables, the things that fiber even, it keeps it moving along, right? Fill it with something better. So in summary here, again, deciding what are your D, C, B, and A level activities. And the first place to look to free up more time is to look first at your D level activities. What can you delete, delegate, defer, or design out? With the time that you saved, upgrade them to A and B level activities. Now, here's the other part we said. If you just try to have an A moment right now, very hard to have A and B moments on demand. Kind of like saying, hey, son, let's have quality time right now. They look at you and say, come on, again? You've been in one of those workshops again? Right? But instead, if you have regular pockets of time that you're spending with them, A and B moments happen. Same thing in your business. If you regularly have focus time and prime time blocks, week after week after week, you will fill it with better things. We said that follow the results rule. 3 bottom lines for the day, 2 business, 1 personal. By 10:30 a.m., you finish the business items there and the personal ones, or you've set up a specific appointment at which you'll go ahead and do that. The last thing we said here was this idea of how can you make sure that the junk time that you have, these time addictions, which are basically things like email, web surfing, passive media like television, can also be your web surfing as well if you're on the sites like, YouTube or even, Netflix or these other places that you're just kind of watching junky stuff, right? And I'll fully admit, I have trouble with that sometimes. I'll sometimes, before I got rid of Netflix, I would watch a season of television. Anyone ever sat down in a setting and watched a season? Yeah, because, I'm watching like, wow, this is really good stuff. This is, and you always want to find out what happens by the first half of the season. You're kind of hooked with it. I get it. So what do I do? For me, I get rid of the temptation. I just don't have it. Got rid of it. Not because I can't afford buying it. I just don't want to afford the price of the impact in my life. I don't want cable television. I don't want that temptation with that. So you'll have to make your own decisions with that. But how can you take even 5 or 10 hours a week of that junk stuff and replace it with better things? Could be more business time. Most likely it should have a component of more time for you to enjoy and refresh and recharge in your life. So you're taking the junk stuff and upgrading it to something better.